Alright, today I'm tearing down one of these Siemens feeders to do a little maintenance and rebuild on it, repair some stuff. I ordered some online and they tend to come kind of broken sometimes. Sometimes they're missing parts, and when you're buying used and no warranty, that's what you get, So this is what they look like when they're all together. Now, I've torn one down and it's a bit of a nightmare mess. Let's just say the engineers, whoever were on this, used every type of screw there is. There is Torx, Phillips, flatheads, there's posts, there's shoulder bolts, there's hex bolts, there's everything, including some very, very tiny set screws. My best estimate is 0.7 millimeter. So there's quite a bit of, some really nicely machined parts here. You got this is the feeder take up gearbox. This here pulls the tape off. So if you spin these motors, you can see these need a little bit of probably grease on these back gears. I wouldn't lube anything that ends up on this tape though. So these gears, it's tough to lube that when it's just going to get all up on here where it's going to get onto the tape, because these actually physically touch the tape. So then here we have the shutter mechanism and part that holds the tape down. If you've ever wondered about how these shutters work and whatnot, this is how. They have a solenoid gearbox here, which is pretty nice little thing. Now, what I've noticed about this that's kind of interesting for somebody who's going to be using these, if you want to set the shutter position, you see those shutters there, you can slide the gearbox forward, or the solenoids can actually slide forward and backwards and set your gearbox points with these. That's what these little screws here are for. Those two screw holes actually hold the solenoid box in place, and so you can adjust that, and it has the slotted holes so you can slide them back, and that actually will set your pick how far your shutter closes on your pick point. So sometimes you're going to want it further back or further forward. A lot of machining in this thing. Here's the back side of the feeder pickup for the tape. This is the tensioner, so that, or well, not tensioner, but tension switch on it, so it determines the tension based on these springs. When the levers go down, they push a spring, so when your tension is right, it'll trigger the switch and then it'll stop the take up. So then here's the the release, which touches or goes onto that gearbox there, and then you have your controls, which are just a single ribbon cable which plugs up to there. Other than that, we have this is the motor control board, and it goes into the bottom here. It snaps in there and it connects to this board, which is essentially just a breakout board. So this thing, for the most part, just breaks out this header on the bottom of this connector here. So this board here has your motor drivers for the tape movement, and then there's the FET controls and such for the other for the shutters, and all that stuff is on this board here. So, and along with the microcontroller, firmware, all that. So there's some other videos out there that are really well done. Tangent Audio did, where he reverse engineered the firmware from this board here, and that's where him and Bill Seff, and that's the reason that there's actually a aftermarket controller for these. All right, now this is the actual gearbox which advances the tape. And now there's three there. They have these covers in between that keep the grease and stuff out, or keeps the grease in and keeps the stuff out. But if you look inside these, there's components in there and stuff. They're all over the place if you look really close. So I'm going to clean these out and potentially re-grease them. They're worm gears in there, so I'm going to have to get in there probably with I don't know yet. I haven't taken them all the way down. I know I can. It just looks like a lot more work than I want to do. So what happens is, if you spin one of these, it advances, and you hear that click is over here. There's actually a ball pin there that hits that stops the motor, so it can't roll backwards. It's hard to see, but you can see that notch there. That's where the pin clicks. So then it won't go backwards. So once it advances 1 notch, it'll only go forward 1 spin, and then it doesn't go any further, or it won't go backwards from that point. So it kind of locks. So that gives you this wheel stop. And you see, so every click is 1 notch, or half a notch probably. But since these things can do the 0.2 millimeter, or I mean the 2 millimeter advance and such for the 0204, 0402s and smaller 0201s. So there's a lot of that down in there. So I'm gonna have to lube these up. There's a little bit of slop in this gear here that if you stop this motor, you can kind of see the slop on this gear when I move it. So I figure a little grease in there probably wouldn't hurt much, take up some of that slop in there and make them run a little smoother overall. But mostly I need to get in there and clean those out and get all that grease out. Now, like I said, these are quite complicated, and I mean somebody put a lot of work into this. This is the guide tube, which goes here, which guides your tape in, your hole, so your components actually come through that. Now you can see they made a really nice press jig, form jig, and pressed it and such, and I don't know exactly, I mean somebody's probably smarter than me and knows how they did that. I'm assuming it's a press jig, but yeah, they made took an extrusion and made the nice little guide thing. And like I said, there's a lot of very nice machining on this thing, and a lot of work went into them, and for the amount of money they cost used, it's pretty amazing that you can get something like this. But of course, unless you have the firmware or the controller to run them, you can't, they're essentially useless, which is where Bill Seff came in and created his control setup that works with OpenPNP and such, which is what I'm actually using to make these work actually in a ManCorp pick and place, which is kind of a long story. It's a bit of reverse engineering. But like I said, when somebody says, what screws do you want? And the answer is yes. I mean, my goodness, they're in there. It's ridiculous. And like I said, there's a screw right here on this part. And I don't know if you can see that, but that looks like to me a 0.7 millimeter hex set screw, and it holds in the pin that guides these, and I have one that's bent, so I actually have to get that pin out. So I'm gonna have to order a set of micros. The closest I could measure was 0.6-ish or something like that, and there is a 0.7 millimeter hex key that's fairly common, so I think that's what it is. But yeah, other than that, like you can see here, this is where the shutter adjustment is. You loosen those screws and slide it forwards and back. This is with it assembled. There's your guide tube. There's your tensioners. So the tape comes across there. You can see how you just kind of put the tape in and push this, and it locks it in place, and then, well, when it's in the right spot. And then it advances and it stores the tape inside the back here. So that's where your waste tape goes from the top of the tapes. Fairly easy to work with. You open these up, you load it in. It's pretty straightforward. If you've ever worked with feeders and tape mechanisms, tape stuff before, it's straightforward. I mean, these made more sense to me than the Autotronic feeders, the ManCorp based ones, but a little hard to open with one hand. But yeah, you can see you just open that and then it flips back, and there's actually a 2-piece part that flips back. Let's see if I can get it open for you. Here, maybe I have, oh, here's one. So if you look, when it flips back, there's actually 2 pieces. So that piece goes on top of the tape, and then on top of the actual paper tape, and then the waste tape comes back across it there, and then this holds that in place. And then the shutter opens and closes when you want it to for the if you're doing, they recommend it for 0402s and smaller to use the shutter so that it holds it in place. Those are also another lubrication point I'm finding, is because a lot of these are very sticky and they're going to have to be realigned. I mean, I bought 15 of these feeders total, so it's going to be a bit of work. But overall, I already have them mounted in the machine. But then after taking apart some more of them I bought, I realized I'm going to have to go through them all and kind of clean them up and get all these components out of them, because I guarantee there's components in every single one of them. So it's, like I said, it's a bit of work. You can see the way they did these things. There's even components inside there stuck to that tape, so they're there. You just have to clean it out and make them work again. But for the most part, all of the ones I've got have worked. I did have a few where these shafts, these all the ones that are flatheads are actually the shafts that hold the gears in place, and they go in through that side. You can see they're Allens. I had a few of those that are loose, and a couple of them were binding up, and I did have one where one of these motors was seized completely. So out of all the feeders so far, I have one that does not work. One lane, which isn't bad out of, well, I've only actually gone through 12 feeders, so I'm gonna end up rebuilding it or doing whatever I can with it, but it's a bit difficult to get to. It's actually this one here, and you can see more what's inside there. So this bottom motor here is locked up, it doesn't spin, so that gear down there is locked, and so you can kind of see these the way they work and where they might need to be lubricated and whatnot. It's a bit of a kind of a little awesome nightmare. And like I said, the machining and the design is excellent. It just seems to me that every engineer or designer they had working on this decided they wanted to use different screws, which is a little annoying to me, but I'm sure they had their reason. So, all right, hope this helps you out, and best of luck getting these things back together once you get them apart. It's pretty straightforward as long as you keep track of the screws. They kind of only go together one way. So, all right, thanks for watching.